November 9th, 1989. The world watched in awe as the Berlin Wall, a concrete divider that once split a city, a nation, and an entire world in two, came crashing down. But what led to this monumental moment? Today, we're going beyond the surface to uncover the deeper significance of the Berlin Wall, the surprising stories behind its rise and fall, and how this barrier forever changed history. To truly understand the impact of the Berlin Wall, we need to go back to the aftermath of World War II. In 1945, Germany was split into 4 occupation zones, controlled by the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and France. The capital, Berlin, was also divided, despite being deep in Soviet-controlled East Germany. The stark contrast between life in the East, dominated by Soviet communism, and the prosperous West, backed by democracy and capitalism, laid the groundwork for a growing divide. As tensions between the US and the Soviet Union mounted, so did the ideological war. East Germans lived under a strict regime, with limited freedom and basic necessities hard to come by. By the 1950s, nearly 3 million East Germans fled to the West, seeking better opportunities. This mass exodus was a threat to the survival of East Germany's communist regime. The solution? A wall that would stop people from leaving. The night of August 12 to 13, 1961. The streets of Berlin were silent, but something monumental was happening. Under the cover of darkness, East German authorities began constructing a barrier. What started as barbed wire quickly turned into a formidable wall that cut through neighborhoods, streets, and even buildings. The wall stretched 27 miles through Berlin, dividing families, friends, and a way of life. Overnight, people found themselves on opposite sides of an impenetrable concrete barrier. But it wasn't just a physical wall. It was a psychological one, a symbol of the Cold War and the East's control over its citizens. Interestingly, the Berlin Wall was not originally planned as a permanent structure. It began as a temporary fix to stem the tide of refugees. In fact, East German leader Walter Ulbricht famously declared just months before its construction, "No one has any intention of building a wall." But desperation to keep people in East Germany drove the government to drastic measures. Life behind the Berlin Wall was marked by intense surveillance and oppression. The East German secret police, or Stasi, employed hundreds of thousands of informants to report on their neighbors, friends, even family members. People lived in fear that any sign of disloyalty could result in imprisonment or worse. But human ingenuity knows no bounds, and despite the wall, thousands of people risked their lives to escape. Some dug underground tunnels, others concealed themselves in modified cars, and a few even soared over the wall in homemade hot air balloons. The stakes were high. Over 140 people were killed trying to flee, but their stories became legendary. One man, Hans Conrad Schumann, a border guard himself, leapt over the barbed wire just days after the wall was erected, becoming one of the first to escape. The Berlin Wall wasn't just a local issue. It became a global symbol of the Cold War, representing the broader ideological struggle between the East and the West. Leaders like John F. Kennedy made powerful statements during visits to Berlin. Kennedy's famous words, "Ich bin ein Berliner," signified solidarity with West Berliners, emphasizing the global stakes of this divided city. And in 1987, US President Ronald Reagan issued a bold challenge to Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." The speech sparked a movement, and more importantly, it reflected the growing global pressure on the communist regime to relent. But beyond the speeches, it's important to remember that the wall was not just about politics. It affected real lives. West Berliners lived in the shadow of the wall, with a daily reminder of the authoritarian regime on their doorstep. Meanwhile, East Berliners, despite government oppression, found ways to resist, creating underground art movements and staging secret protests. November 9th, 1989, was a day no one could have predicted. In the weeks leading up to the fall, East Germans had begun protesting in larger and larger numbers, demanding freedom. The East German government, under immense pressure, announced that travel restrictions would be eased. But due to a bureaucratic mix-up, a spokesperson mistakenly said that people could leave immediately. Crowds flooded the checkpoints, overwhelming the border guards. In that moment, a domino effect occurred. The guards, unsure of what to do, opened the gates. Thousands of East Berliners surged into the West, many of them for the first time in their lives. The wall, once impenetrable, was no longer. That night, the people of Berlin didn't just break down a physical barrier. They shattered decades of division. The fall of the Berlin Wall didn't just reunite a city. It marked the end of the Cold War. Within a year, Germany was reunited, and soon after, the Soviet Union dissolved. The wall's fall is remembered as a victory for democracy and freedom, but it's also a testament to human resilience. Today, fragments of the wall remain as memorials, and visitors from all over the world come to Berlin to learn about the divided city. But beyond the history books, the Berlin Wall is a reminder of how walls, both physical and ideological, can divide us, and how, in the end, they can fall just as quickly as they went up. The Berlin Wall remains one of the most powerful symbols of division, oppression, and, ultimately, hope. Its fall was a moment that changed the world forever, a reminder that even the greatest obstacles can be overcome. What other moments in history have shaped the world? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories from the past.